Hi, how are you? How's everyone today? Welcome to my channel. I've got some shocking news to discuss. Hopefully, I'm the first on YouTube. I like to sort of follow the news and work out what's going on. So, the 2020 French Open has been moved, originally due to start from the May the 24th. I think ending on the 7th of June. Now we have a September 20 to October 4 French Open date. So I want to talk about how this new French Open date of September the 20th to October the 4th and how it's going to affect the ATP tour at large. Anyway, sorry about that. So yeah, I want to get in detail on this announcement. So first of all, let's assume there's going to be no play in the normal clay season, and perhaps we have like a warm up on grass and then Wimbledon. So we're going to sort of start there. So how is these dates changes if we're okay to go by the middle of June? I'm assuming. How is it going to affect everything? So first, everybody's going to come onto the grass court season. They're used to having a long clay court season, tired and exhausted after the Grand Slam, the French Open, and only 3 weeks to change to grass. So you're tired, you're used to clay, and you're making the transition to Wimbledon. So now, what is Wimbledon going to look like? Now you went 4 or 5 months of no tennis. You're too fresh. You're too underdone. Like the Australian Open, you have people are usually fresh but underdone. So it's going to be like that at Wimbledon, but more so because instead of 2 months or 6 weeks, you're talking of 4 months. And you maybe have one tournament, grass court tournament, where you need to get used to the grass. And you also need to just used to being playing tennis, and then you go into a Grand Slam. So that means everybody's going to be fresh at Wimbledon. And the disadvantage that Roger Federer had of being out all that time, that's now gone. So everybody's underdone, everybody's fresh. Maybe the other guys got a chance to train a lot more on the time off. But Wimbledon this year, it's not a Grand Slam where you're tired from a clay court season, a Grand Slam. And then you've got a short time while you're exhausted to get used to grass. Wimbledon this year is a situation where you've got to come from 4 or 5 months break straight into a Grand Slam. And it's not about change from grass to clay. Firstly, you just need to get used to playing any tennis, and then obviously that'll be on grass and we hit it. So the players that can adjust from not playing a long time to go straight into Wimbledon will be the best. So who could that be? I mean, Federer's done it before. I saw the Australian Open 2019 where Nadal didn't play for 4.5 months and he made the final. He lost to Djokovic, but of course, when your rival is winning for months and you're just trying to come back, you may look good against the other guys, but when you play someone on your level, not playing, you're going to be exposed. But he did it well to be in the final, so everybody will be on that. No one will have an advantage over him. So I see him as doing well. Djokovic, I think it could be a bit of a disadvantage, but I wouldn't count him out. I'll give him less of a chance than usual, just because when I saw him come back from his injury 2017, he came back healthy in 2018, took a few months to get back in it. So he'll get back in it, but I just think that like he may need some time, and he can still win Wimbledon, but he's going to be a bit disadvantaged by this, I would say, more than Nadal and Federer. These other players, the young players, who hope to have an advantage by being younger, and the older guys, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, are injured. Are you understanding what I'm? No, not injured. Are more tired, and they can be fresh later in the year. That won't be an advantage for them. So I just see this favouring Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, particularly Federer and Nadal. And Federer's disadvantage of not playing for months is limited too. So that's how I see Wimbledon. But it's going to be interesting to see who can just get out of months out, have one warm up and go straight into Wimbledon, if indeed they're ready to play by that time. So that's Wimbledon. Then we go to the Olympics, where you fought people who'd have been tired, but they're not tired, because you've just started. You're getting back into tennis at Wimbledon. You have 2 weeks off. You play the now you're warmed up. You're ready to go. You're not tired. You're fresh. You're at the best for the. So, I think that's good for the Olympics. The U.S. Open, Cincinnati, the U.S. Open, and Canada Masters. Again, ideal situation for them, because to be peaking, because you had 4 or 5 months off, and you've got grass court warm up, Wimbledon, the Olympics. All the rust from not playing is gone, but you're not tired at the end of the year as you usually are. So I expect players to be peaking and really in a good kind of a state for that type of situation. Then you're going to move on to the French Open, September 20. So you've got now four 4 weeks of Grand Slam tennis, 7 out of best 5 set matches, 4 weeks of that out of a 5 week period. So maybe you're in good shape at US Open, you pass your peak and you're a bit tired. So how could this sort of affect? So at the end of the 4 out of 5 weeks of best 7 out of 5 set matches, is the French Open semi-final or the final at the end of that. And remember, you've got 2 weeks of the US Open, 7 best-of-5 set matches to get through, a week off where you travel to Paris and get used to the time difference, and then you have to do 7 out of 5 sets. So people are going to be, like, all the freshness will last the most of the year, but the French Open, there'll be exhaustion. And then the French Open, it's tiring, it's longer, the matches, slower court, rallies, so fitness will be important. I say Nadal has an advantage over Djokovic and Federer in that area more than normal. I say that because, like, I just feel Federer is obviously older, so he'll be the worst case. But Djokovic, I saw him tied against Thiem in the Australian Open final. I saw him tired, and I just felt like he won all these matches easy. He had 2 days off, and then why was he tired in the second and third set? Then I saw him tired. He's playing Medvedev in the ATP Cup. So after all that tennis, going to the most physically demanding surface, the French Open, it's hard for him to finish points with power. I think he could be disadvantaged. So out of the main three, Nadal will be at advantage. But then if you look at Nadal versus Thiem, obviously Thiem is younger. So now Thiem's always a challenge at the French Open. He may be more of a challenge, and Nadal won't have this whole 2 month clay court where he's built up, he's playing a lot, he's winning a lot. He'll just be coming from a US Open on hard court. But so it also could come down to who can go from hard court to clay in transition. So people would think, Nadal's the best clay courter ever. So when you're facing adversity, who can get ready faster? I would say Nadal can. Thiem, I don't know. But by the time the final happens, it could be a state where Thiem is more of a challenger than normal, because at that state, the exhaustion of 4 weeks of Grand Slam tennis in 5, and the tiredness and the exhaustion. So he's already a challenger. I would say he's more of a challenger now. But again, we just don't know. Thiem's a bit inconsistent. We just don't know the whole setup from the US Open to the French Open, how that'll affect him. But basically, the French Open's now going to be about fitness and who can survive all of that. But the good thing is, at the end of it, as far as injuries, clay's the easiest on your body. So when you're tired and played all this tennis, so for me, Thiem's more of a challenger for Nadal. Djokovic is a less of a challenger if it was earlier. I wouldn't count anyone out. Also, Djokovic is less of a chance at Wimbledon. I still think he's favourite, because I think now with this slower Australian Open, that's his best Grand Slam. So if he can get a warm up and get through the first week, he could be okay. And he's good at the Australian Open coming off an off season, so it's a similar sort of a format. And then for Nadal's season, I see it's quite different. um, because what he usually does is builds up, gets on a great winning run, and then plays the French Open. So he gets the French Open with all that momentum. Now he's coming off other surfaces, so it's not as guaranteed that he's going to have that. Then, as far as Wimbledon, the US Open, he's usually like better there than he is at the Australian Open, I believe, because he's coming off this situation where he's played a lot of clay, winning a lot on clay. He feels almost untouchable, ridiculously high confidence, that he gets his game to such a high level, it almost doesn't matter the surface at this point. And he has all that momentum into Wimbledon, the US Open. But now, with clay being French Open being the last Grand Slam, Nadal's playing Wimbledon not like I've got all this confidence and momentum and I feel untouchable and I'm just changing surfaces. It's like I don't have any confidence matches and I'm playing on a surface that I'm not really that good at. So from that perspective, it's bad. From the fact that he's exhausted after his long clay court season, it could be his best chance to be fresh if he can get to the second week. But all the matches and confidence he gets into Wimbledon, which helps him to play well on a surface he's not good at, he doesn't have that anymore. So there's that. Then for the US Open, like I said, even if he doesn't win Wimbledon, he's lost a match or so, but he still has the momentum. Like I dominated for a few months and I lost a match, and now we're going to the hard court. So he still has that confidence of winning most of his matches leading up to the US season with one loss at Wimbledon. So the momentum that he gets, both it'll affect him at Wimbledon and the US Open. He won't have that confidence. He won't have that feeling like I'm so good now. It doesn't matter if you change the surface. He'll be trying to find form. But then on the other thing, like the US Open is the second best Grand Slam for Nadal. And then if you look at his US Open situation, like playing a whole year, clay court season, moving to the grass, the Olympics, he could have not had a shot that he usually has this year because of being exhausted and then the US Open at the end of the year. Now it's like you're out for months and you're just playing grass court, the Olympics, you'll probably just play Canada. And then I think he's going to be fresh, but not too fresh. So he's going to be like in an ideal situation to produce his best tennis. But he's missing the confidence of winning a Grand Slam that year, the clay court. So there's positives and negatives for Nadal. Like I said, more fresh, physically way better condition, but mentally not that feeling of a run of matches and maybe I only lost at Wimbledon. But for 3 months, I've dominated everything except one tournament. He doesn't have that anymore. So it's interesting when you take away his confidence and his matches and his dominance, but you add more freshness for the US Open. Whether that's a good thing, it's good in one area, bad in the other. Same with Wimbledon. He's usually there exhausted. I don't believe he can give his best effort. That's why he won in 2008 and 10. He could still come off the clay court season, have freshness and energy at Wimbledon. He hasn't had that for a while, but now he'll have it because he's going to be like too fresh. So it's the opposite. So uh, it'll be interesting to see him being too fresh, but not having all that confidence of just winning the French Open and momentum. How it will be, you take that away, you take all the matches, the confidence and wins, but at the same time, he's usually too exhausted to play. Now he's just as fresh as you can ever be. So that'll be interesting. The only thing we know, he doesn't play well at the Australian Open after a long break, but he did in 2019. So for Federer, I think this helps him because the three Grand Slams, he's just going to be fresh. He's not going to be like, I'm tired and exhausted at the US Open as normal. He'll be fresh for that. He'll be fresh. Maybe the tiredness might set in at the French Open if he plays now. So the situation is, by the time Federer gets exhausted, we're at the French Open, and that's his worst surface. So he's probably less of a challenger there, more of a challenger at Wimbledon, US Open. He can't win the French anyway, so that's probably a good thing for him to be in a better condition. For Nadal, you give, like I said, freshness at Wimbledon, the US Open, he wouldn't have, but you take away the confidence and momentum of dominating clay. For Djokovic, the one slam the rest of the year is the best chance. you put him in a situation where he's just underdone and it's got to come off a break. He does well at the Australian Open, but then we've seen at the start of 2018, he took to a Wimbledon 6 months to get his game going. So it could be a disadvantage for him, I see. But it'll be interesting if you get to the semi-finals and final of Wimbledon if these guys have enough matches. But I think overall this will favour Federer, Nadal, Djokovic against the next generation. It'll favour them all at US Open and Wimbledon, but the US French Open, they're going to be more tired, which really pushes down Djokovic and Federer to have an upset and makes it harder for Nadal and makes Thiem more of a challenger. But I still say Nadal's favourite, but the gap closes. And it's also debatable how Thiem will do with a transition straight away from hard court to clay. I think Nadal will do that better, but then as far as energy, by the end of the French Open, all that tennis, I see that favours Thiem. But I'll predict Nadal. The other ones I'm not going to predict, but I just want to say, yeah, we've got a whole different set of circumstances. Wimbledon's going to be nothing like it was, where players are exhausted and transitioning from clay to grass, instead just coming into it with 4 or 5 months of no tennis. It's going to completely shape and change that. The US Open, not so much, but they'll have their matches in by now, but they just won't be exhausted, so it'll improve the quality. And now the French Open's going to be the one everybody's going to be tired and exhausted and survival fittest. So that's how I see the year. I just want to say, do I think it's a good or a bad decision? I think what you got to do in this situation with the coronavirus, you need to see the Grand Slams are the most important. So if it means that we could only get 3 tournaments the rest of the year and we have to cancel everything else and reschedule the Grand Slams to say we need to get those in and we're willing to cancel everything else, which if that situation arises, they should do. So from that perspective, I just think that it's a good decision. You've got to put the Grand Slams first. You've got to do whatever you can to make them played. And I think this does this. This makes it more likely that all the Grand Slams will be played, and that's got to be a priority. And something's going to sacrifice. But just to say, the French Open is in May, June. So if the coronavirus isn't over, we just lose a Grand Slam. I don't think we do that. I think we do whatever we can to get these 3 Grand Slams in. And this does it. It's not ideal going from the US Open, 2 weeks of Grand Slam tennis, best 7 out of 5, and then just a week off where you have to travel to France, get used to jet lag, all this. It's not ideal. But I'm saying as far as what's the most likely situation to get the Grand Slams in the rest of the year, this makes it the most likely that it could be. And it also means that Wimbledon's the most likely to be cancelled of the 3, and then the US Open and the French are most likely to play, and the French is the most likely of all to play. But I just think the ATP Tour should have with this coronavirus. So we're just delaying all the Grand Slams, and we're doing everything. That's the priority. And whatever other tournaments can go around that, it should be done. But if you don't do that and you try to keep the calendar as it is, you risk losing Grand Slams and playing smaller tournaments. And I don't think you do that. I think you put the Grand Slams and you give them the number one priority to play. And I think that's what this decision does. It hurts smaller tournaments, helps Grand Slams. And I just think with the situation with Federer at 20 Grand Slams, Nadal at 19, Federer probably would have hoped that you cancel the French Open and you make it less likely. In May, June, that happens. But to say, well, Nadal can tie Federer this year, the most likely situation to have that French Open this year and still have another one the next year is this change. And I just think there should be 4 Grand Slams a year every year. And when we look at the best player of all time, we should be able to see they're not it wasn't a situation where Federer got 1 extra Wimbledon and Nadal got 1 pointless French Open. It should be equal. There should be 4 Grand Slams a year, and they should do everything to make it happen. And delaying these tournaments and cancelling smaller tournaments and saying we're doing everything to make the Grand Slams happen, and we're willing to sacrifice other tournaments. And I even think they could maybe even delay Wimbledon too. Um, Perhaps, well, there's a 2 week break between um, Wimbledon and the Olympics, so we could delay it a week, or we could perhaps consider cancelling the US Open warm-up tournaments, like the one in Canada, perhaps, and in August, sort of after the Olympics, hold Wimbledon too. So perhaps have you got Wimbledon in August, and then the US Open, French Open in September, and we're hoping it's going to be all right. But as for now, I don't think Wimbledon's got more time. They should give it another 6 weeks. If it looks like it's getting better, keep it where it is. But everything should be done to keep these Grand Slams on. And even if we have to cancel everything else and just have 3 Grand Slams and nothing else, ideally you want one warmer, but that should be the priority. And I think this does that. And then the only thing to think about is if Wimbledon also needs to be moved. But we've got to get all these Grand Slams off. And the scheduling makes it the best possible, but it's not ideal. US Open, French Open, back to back, a week in the middle to travel. But if that's the only way that they play them, then that sacrifice has to happen. I'm going to please subscribe. I'm going to make more videos. I want to talk about Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, the GOAT debate, who's going to be the best of all time, and all of that. And I want to talk more, like this whole year is going to be different with the Grand Slams in different times and formats and favoritism. I want to do previews, and I want to talk more about that, and the GOAT debate, and who's the best of all time, and who's likely to win, and where it's all likely to end up. But for now, my video, I made it quite long, but it was just about the change of dates of the French Open and how it affects the tour, how it affects who's likely to win the Grand Slams, and I've done that. So subscribe, have a wonderful day and night wherever you are, and I'll be here on this channel maybe later on the week or next week about the GOAT debate. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.